listen to
Hello, welcome to PODnas. This is a sports show with a Cajun flair. I am Daniel Hawks. That's Jarrett Roser. Today we are going to have your idiot's guide to the 2024 LSU football season. And hey, I'm your resident idiot. That is me. I can't even point the right direction.
I was about to say, folks may have noticed from the point to start.
Jared, how are you doing? How are you doing?
Good, man. By the time we're getting a chance to record this, the Tigers have opened fall practice, so was out there sweating, watching them start their season, start their journey to a month away, that opener in Vegas against USC and everything else ahead.
We are rapidly approaching that kickoff game versus USC that they tried to get out of. Let's not forget, never forget. But one thing that we want to do that we talked about is because I routinely need to get updated on what is happening down in Baton Rouge because I'm not down there. I'm up here in Chicago. We thought it'd be fun to do a kind of bless your heart guide to the LSU football season with the person's heart getting blessed is usually me. But if there's anyone out there who doesn't know what's going on, that does not live here, we want to make sure that they know what are the important storylines coming up, who are the players that we should be watching for, and all the kind of big things that we are looking for coming up into the LSU season this year. So let's get started, and let's get started with that first question. What are some of the biggest storylines that you feel that are coming up for this season and for this LSU team?
Sure. I mean, it's year 3 under Brian Kelly and company, and they've been a 10-win team the last couple of years.
Sorry, I was counting. What are the storylines?
They've been a 10-win team the last couple of years, and it's a program now that he has had a chance to, I think, recruit a few cycles on and leave his imprint on. But at the same time, some notable new assistants on that staff, including a new defensive coordinator. They've got the co-offensive coordinators who are guys that were a part of this staff before, but in a bigger role now. And so they're trying to kind of come together in that capacity. I think there's a lot of talent back from last year's team, but certainly some key guys. A guy that we've talked about a lot, breaking in a new quarterback is always a huge storyline. And as much as folks down here certainly know who Garrett Nussmeier is, apparently at least one guy in Chicago does not. And
listen, I know who he is. I just couldn't say his name. There's a difference. There's a reason why I called myself the idiot. Okay. It lets me off the hook for all these things. I can be taught, but it just takes a while.
So breaking in a new quarterback is always interesting, but it's a guy that there's a lot of confidence in. There's a couple of spots on the defensive side of the ball, I'm sure, that we'll talk a little bit more about that are bigger question marks. And so watching how the defense comes together, particularly in that secondary and on the defensive line under Blake Baker, who returns to the program as the new DC, heading into a season that has a tough schedule and, an SEC that now includes Texas and Oklahoma. And so there's a lot from a lot of different directions and angles to watch. But this is a team that feels like they can compete at a really high level against anyone on any given week. And so we'll see if they get there by the time September hits.
Now, one of the biggest things that I guess pain points that I had watching last year was the defense. What is is there any news around that defense? Are we expecting it to be better? I mean, it was fairly poor last year. The performance wasn't the best. Is there going to be a turnaround this year for a school that, LSU is routinely known as a solid defensive school? This was very out of character for us last year.
Yeah, it was a poor performance. It was a porous defense, or you want to phrase it. And I have a difficult time thinking that they could be much worse with just the talent that comes through LSU. And as I've mentioned to you before, my expectations for Blake Baker at the top of that defense, but also Corey Raymond coming back, Bo Davis coming back to the alma mater, and the coaching staff that they have together now in Baton Rouge. I trust that group to have these guys more prepared and in better position than what we saw a lot of times last year. At the same time, there's some good talent there, but it is not one of the high-end talented defensive units that we remember from back when we were growing up or in college or, national championship type teams. There's a lot of question marks to figure out, particularly in that secondary and on the interior of the defensive line. And so watching how some of those guys come along, both the top end of that depth chart, as well as just filling out the rotation and having some depth to it that it takes to compete at a high level in the SEC is going to be interesting to watch. I do think they'll be improved. I don't think it's going to be the best LSU defense we've ever seen, but I think they have the chance to be certainly good enough for this team to compete at that high level if they want to.
So let's go right into we've talked about how, we lost obviously Jaden and Malik and Brian Thomas. And we're bringing in that whole new crop of players on offense. Who are some returning starters, returning stars, if you will? Who are some names that we need to know? And also on that defense, same thing. Who are some players that we know? I know we could say Harold Perkins, who looks like he's going to be a top possibly 5 draft pick, depending on how things fall out. And then who are some players of that new crop that are coming in that are looking to make a better name for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense to start with the preseason All SEC guys, and you mentioned one of them there, Harold Perkins, a first-team selection on defense. There's a first-team selection on offense as well, and the left tackle, Will Campbell, who has been phenomenal from the time he stepped foot onto campus as a freshman 2 years ago. He'll be a junior this year and has been a starter now for 3 years. And so those guys. Mm-hmm. Will's buddy and counterpart on the right side of that line, Emory Jones from Catholic High in Baton Rouge, another fantastic. I mean, you can't ask for a better tackle duo than those two guys that are back with a ton of experience under their belt. Emory was a second-team selection along with Kyron Lacey, who's kind of the veteran of that wide receiver group that you watch Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas go on to the league. Kyron becomes kind of the de facto leader of the group. And then Mason Taylor, the fantastic tight end. Second team selection on defense, Major Burns, another Baton Rouge guy from Madison Prep, he was working today at first day of practice in kind of the star position, safety, working down in the box a lot, which really suits his size and skill set. And then a couple of special team selections as well. And Slade Roy, the third team long snapper, probably not a guy you know a ton, but was big.
Wait, what's his name? Say that again.
Slade Roy.
No, that's my favorite. That's my favorite player. I have a Slade Roy jersey.
He's a guy that transferred in and has been really good for that special teams group. And then a transfer this year, Xavier Thomas, a New Orleans native that started his college career at Mississippi State, is now back in his home state and is a dynamic return guy from what we've seen in his years in Starkville, and is expected to be a big piece, special teams and offense for the Tigers. And so that's as good of a group to start with. There's certainly some notable returners around them. I mean, Sage Ryan is a guy that folks know in the secondary, probably. Greg Penn, a really productive linebacker alongside Howard Perkins.
Is there anyone on the team on either side, or either any of the 3 facets of the game that you think did not make an all SEC team or all American team last year? Either one that has a chance to this year?
Yeah, I mean, talking about guys that have some expectations, I think, is, both from me and folks close to the team, on top of the guys that we just mentioned, I think the offensive line is going to be strong. We mentioned the 2 tackles, but that unit as a whole is going to be really good. They returned 4 starters, and I was
going to say they're gelled. They played together a lot. They're locked in. Not talking about the guys that we know are going to do well, that we know are going to bring it every week. Is there someone that, I don't know, maybe it's a true freshman, maybe it's someone that, like you said, Lacey was behind that star duo last year that now finally has a chance to shine? Someone like that.
Yeah, I think the receiving core is going to be really good in general. And as much as Kyron is kind of the known commodity there, I expect some nice production from that group overall. Some of the young guys really looked good on the first day of camp, but a guy that has been kind of waiting and knocking at the door and seeming like he was going to be ready for a breakout season last year, but then was kind of banged up again. He seems as healthy as he's ever been. Looks fantastic. Chris Hilton Jr., the speedy wide receiver from Zachary High, who's now in his 3rd year at the program and has been kind of a rotation type guy, but couldn't get over that hurdle. He looks like he might be as prime for a breakout as anyone right now.
And say that name one more time for me.
Chris Hilton Jr.
Chris Hilton Jr.
Do you feel
I'm
like
making a list? Yeah.
So
Yeah, from
Chris
our
has
previous podcast stuff, I feel like I'm getting quizzed.
Chris has always been phenomenally athletically gifted in terms of his speed, dynamic, short area quickness, long speed, his leaping ability, all those things. He's also tacked on some noticeable muscle and looks very much the part of an SEC receiver at this point. And so how
Do the
he
kids
fits
still
in,
say yoked? Does he look
yeah,
yoked?
yeah, it gets used occasionally. So
That means no.
I think there are a lot of guys to watch in that receiving core, but he's someone that I think is top of my mind to emerge alongside Kyron
Okay.
Lacey as the other guy. Defensively, I think a notable new face is a U High guy who transferred back from Texas A&M, and Jordan Gilbert, who he's working at safety right now. And I didn't even realize you were wearing the
Yeah.
U High team. But Jordan coming back home should have the opportunity to be a really key piece of that secondary at safety. And so as much as we want to see how is that secondary going to perform, he's another guy that is a veteran, but is new to, that purple and gold jersey and should be a big factor there to help shore up that defense. And then some of the younger guys, they need defensive linemen to step up, even if a couple of freshmen aren't going to play huge minutes. They need to kind of fill out that rotation. And so I think there's an opportunity for Gabe Relaford, the freshman defensive end from Evangel. I think there's a chance for Dominic McKinley, the freshman defensive tackle from Acadiana. So those are two names to know in the trenches up front of that freshman class. There's a few freshman defensive backs that I think PJ Woodland, the corner from Mississippi, and Deshaun Spears, the safety from Denham Springs, are probably the first two to know, and folks here have their eyes on a little bit. I also think it's worth watching Mike Turner Jr., a freshman out of John Curtis, who was really kind of looked at as a receiver for a lot of his recruiting process, but he's been working at corner. He's still real thin, but is super fluid and someone that I know Corey Raymond has really high expectations for sooner than later. So whether that's right off the bat or maybe midway through freshman season, if he can continue to tack on weight and, handle the transition to college the way that there is an expectation that, he may be capable of doing, we may see him sooner than later. And then on the other side of the ball, younger guys potentially stepping in. I think Tradez Green, the freshman tight end / big receiver from Zachary High, and then Jelani Watkins, the speedy, smaller slot receiver type guy from out in Texas, is someone that folks have their eyes on potentially earning an opportunity in that rotation.
Hey, we love to see it. And this is great because I so many people to look forward to. I had no clue about until now.
It's a really talented team, and a lot of guys, obviously we mentioned at the top, that people should know that are back and should be among the best in the league, but there are a lot of talented younger guys that I think have a chance to make an impact early.
What is the vibe like at that? Because you were at the first practice today, right? What is the vibe like with the team? Like, does it seem like this team, because you can tell a lot, that 2019 team felt like they all were in it together. They knew what they were doing. They wanted it really bad. And, it showed. And that is kind of what happens when they're championship teams. They're just really good teams. The locker room tends to be really good, and there tend to be not a lot of distractions. Towards the end of the previous coach's tenure, there were a lot of distractions. So I feel like that kind of permeates through the locker room if that kind of happens. Do you have any sense of kind of what that is like and what this team's kind of demeanor is going into the season?
Yeah, I think vibes are strong, even going back to being around the program this summer at some prospect camps and stuff like that, that the current players help out the coaches as kind of almost like camp counselors, assistant coaches, just kind of helping organize some of the drills and everything going on. The camaraderie and just way that the guys get along is great. Always together in different groups and getting along and joking with one another and whatnot. And you saw some of that today, all of the quarterbacks, as much as there's competition for that depth chart and who's going to back up Garrett and be the number 2 guy and whatnot, you could see them kind of having fun with each other and joking around and throwing the ball in the air and like duck shooting it down sort of thing. And so just little moments like that.
Yeah.
And the energy today I thought was really good. Everybody came out with kind of that hop in their step and excitement to get started and realize that there is an opportunity here to be a really nationally notable team by the time that season opener rolls around. At the same time, the intensity at moments of Brian Kelly and the coaches on day one to make sure that everything was being handled in terms of their processes and their protocols, and don't, we're huddled up right now wrapping up this drill, don't break that huddle early trying to head to the next drill, we're finishing this before we go to that, and those sort of things. And so BK got a little feisty in some spots, and I think for him there's an aspect of just making sure they're laying the foundation the way it needs to be laid, but also for him realizing that there is a big opportunity and they don't want to let any of it slip by them because they don't have the right attention to detail.
So there's a funny thing actually up here that I get every time I say I'm an LSU fan or that I root for the Tigers, because Brian Kelly was at Notre Dame for so long. So there are a lot of people familiar with Brian Kelly up here, at least think they're familiar with Brian Kelly. Every single person when I talk to him just says year 3 of Brian Kelly is like the year. Like, does that come through down here? Is that like ever like talked about in whether it's in the media or just with casual conversations with fans or anything? Because up here, it's like every conversation I have at some point, it's like, well, year 3, Brian Kelly, it's, you'll see.
In terms of just the high expectations and being able to
of succeeding at those high expectations. And really you start to see,
I think the combination of a level of expectation of a good coach who succeeded in the past, that there's always sort of that by the time you get to year 2, year 3, and they've had a chance to, as we mentioned at the top, have a few recruiting cycles and fill that roster with their guys, which, I mean, in this situation, Kelly and company were really rebuilding that roster from a bad spot a few years ago from a numbers standpoint, but also laying out your expectations for day to day. This is what this program is going to be about. This is how we're going to go about things. And so there's some of that in general. There's also been a recent track record of high level success for LSU coaches in other sports in year 2 and beyond. And so there's not a lot of patience for LSU fans if you don't kind of get over.
No, you don't say.
In the first couple of years. And when you first mentioned, I thought you were going to say that folks were kind of hard on Brian Kelly about personality wise, and if I see a difference.
Oh, well, yeah, they all are. No, and I am too.
The narrative was, but he's
I have a lot of cheesy dude. He's a cheesy dude. That's who he is.
I have a lot of positive vibes coming out of today's practice of the way he handled some things with he and some assistants with some jokes in some moments, as well as being on top of everything and really, I mean, kind of getting after guys a little bit in some spots. And also just anecdotally, and this matters to no one outside of the media corps, but they were setting us up to try and watch practice from this small kind of clustered balcony, a full field away from where anything was happening. And so all of the reporters are all kind of on top of each other, trying to get little camera shots and whatnot. And then we saw Brian Kelly talking to one of the media people in-house for LSU and pointing toward us. And given all of the history of LSU media relations, we kind of assumed that, oh, maybe we're not supposed to be here. This was misrelayed and they're about to get in trouble and kick us out and whatnot. And then we get told, hey, Kelly said to come down to the sideline over around here because he doesn't think you guys can see well enough from there. And so he wants to bring everybody down to the field. And so that was a really unusual set of circumstances for covering LSU, where there hasn't historically been a lot of, favorable opportunity for viewing and access and all those things. It's really been tight through the years. And for him to kind of welcome and say, come on down. We want to make sure these guys can see, and these guys and men and women can see and get the reports and whatnot. But also, I think goes back to, I think he has a lot of confidence in what this team can be and wants to make sure that there's some good feelings coming out through us and that we're getting a chance to see.
I would also see, and I can't speak to anyone else, but I think it also just shows an awareness of the media and the culture and everything like that, to be able to just even recognize that in the middle of a practice when you have so many other things going on. Um, Listen, I thought he was a cheesy dude from the moment he stepped on campus. I said if he beat
He's
Alabama, I really wouldn't care. He did that the first year, so I haven't cared.
yeah. Look, he's a he's an a a past middle age probably gentleman who he's got kind of like a corny dad insurance salesman type vibe to a lot of, but he's fun and he's engaging in a way that I don't know that people at Notre Dame necessarily had a chance to see. And so
I just
I've grown
imagine. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I've grown a greater appreciation for kind of the personality that he brings, certainly, because he's had some tight moments these last couple of years dealing with some less than positive outcomes on the field or some drama around the program, and the way that he's handled that when we've been kind of through the years used to being snapped at even when we're not being jerks. He's handled a lot, and I think really really enjoyable ways when he can.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the Brian Kelly presser, because you just went to it. Any notable notes coming out of that, or is there anything that you wanted to mention on here for the idiots that need to know, and the
Yeah,
non-idiots, both people, and the only idiot that we're talking about, by the way, guys, is me. Let me look at it. It's me. I'm the idiot that needs to know. So, so tell me.
yeah. I mean, in terms of news type updates and whatnot, which I think idiot or not, they serve anyone well. Uh, J- Javian Toviano, who was recently suspended from team activities, he's been reinstated, and so that's a boost to that secondary. He's apparently still waiting through some legal dynamics, and so it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out. But he was at practice today, and they're green lighting him to be a part of everything.
Cool.
Also, newly cleared on the health front, Zy Alexander, one of the top corners from last
Yeah.
year before
Yeah.
suffering a
Yeah.
knee
Yeah.
injury. He's now greenlit, and so they'll be catching him up to speed through camp. Another nice boost to that secondary, a place that they could certainly use it. And then John Emery Jr., who's back. He's been a part of this program for forever. Was in the transfer portal at one point, is now
Yeah.
back and coming back from his knee injury. And they were working him quite a bit today on day one. They said they wanted to get him some high leverage reps throughout camp to make sure that he's pushing that knee to the limits now, so that by the time they get to that USC game and beyond, he has already kind of seen it through everything this August and knows that he can play confidently, comfortably, play fast, play physical, and all those things. And so I think those are probably the three big news
Cool.
element updates coming out of day one.
Great, great. I love to see it. I think last thing that we talked about is predictions for the season. Kind of what is the ceiling? What is the floor? I don't know if you want to go through each game and give me a win or a loss, or do you think this team can win 10 games? Do you think we can make it to Atlanta again and maybe show out a little bit more? What's the ceiling? What's the floor? And is the ceiling the roof?
Yeah,
Hashtag Michael Jordan.
I do think they're certainly capable of being a 10 win, potential playoff type team again. I don't really want to go through game by game yet, more so because I need to get a better sense of where some of these other teams are. But the schedule's always tough from an SEC standpoint. And then you add the fact that you open against a USC and you have a home game against the UCLA. And so there's some challenges ahead for sure. Not a whole lot of gimme type games on that schedule, but I think if you really push the floor and say what is the absolute floor, it would be 7-5, and that's really on the lower end. I think that would be pretty surprising if they ended up being a 7-5 team. They, in preseason votes, they tied for the fifth most likely champion of the conference according to the the regional media, and I think that's kind of where they are, fourth, fifth type likeliest, but with a chance to, as they answer some of those DB and D line questions, possibly exceed those expectations. And so I'm looking at them as hopefully a 10 win team, but in that ballpark, 8, 9, 10.
All right. All right.
Maybe beyond, maybe
I was
push
going to
that thing
say,
and get to 11.
hey, I'm going to say 10. I'm going to go on the record 10. We're doing 10 wins. That's where we're going. Seems like a very LSU number of wins.
Yeah. And
Uh,
and that's, I mean, just looking at the regular season, those 12 games, I think they realistically can win 10, 11 would be pretty impressive, but I think they are capable of that. But I think a 9 or 10 win regular season is kind of where I'm sitting.
I think having Old Miss and Alabama at home, I'm looking at the schedule right now,
Yes.
and Oklahoma are big. Uh, it's going to be tough to play at the Swamp, no matter how the team is at all. And Texas A&M is annoying all the time. So,
Yeah. Te-
uh,
Texas A&M is one of those teams that I still refuse to buy any level of hype, and their hype this year isn't what it's been in some recent years. And so I tend to just pencil in an LSU win against against A&M, even when there have been worst odds against the Tigers. And I like the fact, if I'm LSU, that I have Oklahoma this year and not Texas as well.
yeah, absolutely, 1000%. And is that Oklahoma game going to now be the after Thanksgiving game every single year? Is that who we're paired up with?
That seems like that's what they're gearing it to be.
Is this because of 03 and 07? Is that why they did this?
I don't know, man. But the schedule is moving forward past this year. I think is still somewhat in flux as they kind of adjust to the new normal of this expanded league. I was talking to the Mississippi State quarterback about a month ago, a Louisiana guy that it had been at Baylor and transferred out to Mississippi State, Blake Shapen, and just naturally assume every year an LSU and Mississippi State game is somewhere on the schedule, because I kind of lost track of how much everybody's structured.
Oh, I didn't even recognize that. Oh gosh.
I mentioned to him, hey, that'll be cool playing the home state team at some point. How are you feeling about that? And he said it would be awesome if it was the way it always is, but I'm not going to get that chance this year.
Wow. I didn't even recognize that looking in. All right. Hey, it's going to be a fun season, no matter what. The ups and football's back, the ups and downs, everything that goes along with it. I'm super excited for it. Cannot wait for the kickoff game. Jared, do you have anything else you want to add before we get out of here today?
No, I mean, just keep up with us, obviously, on the PODnas playlist and on the Louisiana vs. All Y'all channel. I have the Brian Kelly presser and some of my initial takeaways from the day one of practice, and we'll have some little clips of some footage that I took, and all the way leading up to the season. We'll be talking more about it. There'll be more pressers, interviews with players, and I'll be bouncing around trying to get out to UL and to Tulane and whatnot as well. But we'll be at LSU for most, if not all, of what they have.
Hey, and like he said, we'll be back with that. So follow us on like he said, the Louisiana versus All Y'all page. All the PODnas episodes will be there. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at PODnas_LA. And then, I'm at Hawks Can Fly on Instagram if you want to see what my likes about. It's just like my name right here, but Can Fly is after. That is all we got for you today. We're going to come back to you next week, and we will keep you up to date with everything Louisiana sports, because that's what we do here at PODnas. PODnas out.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it. I've been comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it, get it, get it, get it. Comma and a comma.